evening, everyone. We are recording this sharing of August study. We are in Fatima, and tonight we'll reflect about the content that was brought to us in 2010, an impulse along the lines of Saint Francis that can help us not only on our awakening, but also in our inner maturity, stemming from the elements of life, which was also the experience of Francis, who had many complex practices, not complex practices, but life as his goal. The objective is the title of tonight is to live life the way it presents itself. You can send questions on the chat, and in the next sharings, we will include them in our contents. Someone asks, what does it mean spiritually to transcend free will? Free will is part of our experience at this moment in the cycle that this mental race is going through. We have chosen spiritually for this experience as if we could decide, as if we had any power over our destiny. Free will is a very long path of many and many lives. We can start the trajectory of dealing with free will first by remembering and awakening to our inner world, and from that, maybe combining our free will with this awakening, which comes gradually with this beginning of relationship with our inner life. This is a trajectory that has no rules. It depends on the power of love for this awakening. It will be the rhythm with which this free will be disciplined so that it may correspond to what is our path. Let's not be mistaken, this is a process. Why do students become tired of higher knowledge and do not persevere on the spiritual path? Many started this path in other lifetimes. We have had many opportunities in the universe and also on the planet to undertake this quest, which we call spiritual path. In general, a common point that leads us to give up or weaken our adherence to this is that we do not apply what we know or we do not persist in the face of some tests. And this is all part of the path. There is no judgment or an evaluation of how this happens. These are simply cycles, and depending on long, how much we become tired of ourselves, in other words, to what extent the spiritual awakening prevails over the insistence on human experiences, this will determine how fluent this will be, how fluid it will be in our experiences. And when we take too long, why do we take too long to live what we know is the correct thing for us? So if we receive an impulse, but we take long, we lag, and this delay may lead to distancing from our inner world, and the ego may see no benefit on the spiritual path, so it doesn't have a stimulus to continue. This happens very commonly. Well, in what state of consciousness must the human being find themselves to understand their inner reality, to be in this attitude of faith? In other words, not basing this inner contact on anything concrete or nothing abstract, just be in an attitude of faith, that inner recognition that we are part of something broader. This is faith. We find our within something that is there, a state that connects us with something transcendental and calms us down, deep down. And Combined with that, an attitude of silence. So in faith, we are in silence. And with that, this inner reality starts to communicate with us. We have studied this, we have the symbols of dreams, the numbers. So this becomes more and more friendly somehow, and we undertake our path. Another question: what information do those who are decided to continue when they're moved by this inner light? What do they need? Control the word and love. Silence may be two important impulses. To control the word may mean, in this context, to say just what is necessary and give priority to gratitude. In other words, our being whole, as we'll see today, in the face of what presents itself to us, not having this thought, this critical thought or hypocritical thought, this interests, everything that plays in our consciousness and does not allow us to interact with everything with freedom, a healthy, neutral, serene, elevated, anonymous freedom. So to control the word. And with that, we'll have the best opportunities of each moment. And in this silence, in this absence of judgment, analysis, all these filters, we gradually quiet down and all this becomes more and more conscious. And these attitudes with time lead us to receive the indications that we need, how to receive information by being in this position, in a simple place of humility, gratitude, and from that, everything will reorganize itself with great simplicity, with great simplicity. I don't remember, I don't remember any enlightened being, as we usually call, who has been complicated. When the being goes through a certain portal, they become simpler and simpler, simpler and simpler with many apparatus, many supports. They have understood that it's about dissolving into and merging into the whole and not becoming detached from the whole. We have two more questions that are very important according to my understanding. One says, what's the difference between choosing and discerning? Is it the same? Are they the same thing? Discern and choose? No, it's not the same thing. To choose may be more connected to some personal benefit. We choose when we measure to what extent that will be good to us or to some situation, and when that decision will coincide with our perspective of a benefit or of gaining something or something in that situation. Discerning is more mature, is a more mature process that is more on a mental, higher mental plane and has to do with seeking clarity about what is at stake in some situation. And from that, some reference of a point in consciousness, we gradually discern how that has to be decided, defined, understood, and must be undertaken from this reference of something higher in our inner consciousness. So choosing something more material, connected to gratifications, retributions, more connected to relationships, and discerning is an exercise of the consciousness. We may be in the same situation, combine both things, choosing and discerning. When we put more priority on the spiritual development, we will be discerning and we'll have to contradict some attitudes of the human ego, which is self affirmation. And when we discern, we seek within us this inner force of this deeper consciousness, which is that energy that will lead us to go through this haze of human reality without becoming confused, even if we still may slip sometimes, trip sometimes. And the last question, which can be a great stimulus for us before the topic of free will. What instructions can we absorb from the crucifixion of Jesus? What symbols are there in that image? In Jesus there being crucified, maybe yielding to that situation. What is the power of Jesus at that moment? And very important instruction and very elevated before this fact was the reference of someone who, even being able, decided not to come down from the cross. Because Jesus, being the one who he was, he could have dematerialized himself, lived other laws, and not be there. Those garments would be there, the body that was there, and disappear from there. But he didn't do that. Even if though he could, he didn't want to come down from the cross and decided to live what he was supposed to live until the end. So this is a very important reference as the question came when we can eventually do something humanly expected, but spiritually we know that the best is to live that until the end, which will give us a greater opportunity for service, respected the proportions. A very important questions. Those who have other questions, whatever questions or like these, please send them because they always help us expand the preparation of these sharings. Well, inevitably, we are created, raised in our civilization to create expectations, to desire experiences, and to make of the process of incarnation a repetition of what we have lived in other lifetimes or have some kind of experience. And with that, the evolutionary potential of each incarnation becomes very restricted because we always go on along the line of free will and along the line of the conditioning that karma brings us. And this limits the evolutionary process as a whole. And in each incarnation that we know through classical spirituality, it is as if the soul lived an amnesia, even if it's an old soul, a soul that is in contact with the inner instructors, the instructor of the world, and all that. That soul, when it incarnates, it forgets. It has a new opportunity to rebuild many paths and many trajectories. Well, so we bring a karma of previous experiences also in the universe, and at each incarnation is an opportunity to resume some point we had interrupted at a previous life or even in the cosmos, and that then has a cycle of awakening of opportunities. So when we awaken to our inner world, and we start to suspect that there is something broader and vaster, we inevitably need to confront our personal will and start to suspect that this personal will is not conducive. We start seeking other paths that will help us glimpse them in the current moment, possibilities that are in our normal life, in daily life, but which are filtered by this gaze of free will and self affirmation. Well understood, this should not be mixed with self victimism or playing the victim, because we'll see that Francis of Assisi brought us. It's not the feeling of being a victim, but of someone that knows that that knows what the filter of selfishness means and how much this hinders our liberation from the wheels of incarnation. Unless we enter this kind of experience, which all of us face as humanity at the end of a cycle, we start discovering many things. The first thing that is most evident and is the greatest impulse for us to persist is that we start to feel free from ourselves. This may seem a contradiction. We start to experience freedom that we did not know when we, after doing some kinds of practices that were reaffirming our personality. But when we start transcending ourselves and the movements of the human ego, we start connecting with the inner life, and very spontaneously, a kind of freedom starts to emerge, which we did not know up to now. And this freedom brings us an inner force and a feeling of joy, so that we feel that we are glimpsing a new horizon, completely disconnected from external situations, material situations, totally free from others, the situations. It's a considerable liberation. So, this impulse that Francis of Assisi brought to us, he called the chemistry of transcendence. It's the foundation of the study of today, which is to live life the way it presents itself. So let's come to these impulses. If during some inner experience we do not feel anything, live it all the same, because the ego becomes accustomed to retributions, gratifications, to commerce, trade, projected onto spiritual life. And when we live an experience and we do not feel anything, the tendency of the mind and personality is to abandon that, leaving that exercise aside, looking for something else that may bring some taste or retribution. So Francis of Assisi, without anesthesia, says, if during an inner experience you do not feel anything, live it all the same. And he continues, if you have to do something without understanding its hidden reason, do it all the same. So we coexist. As we'll see, these living things uh, all the same within this chemistry or combination of impulses that he brings helps us transcend, helps us see that this mental filter, this prejudice, this mental judgment of doing things from a personal choice may really make us drift away from many lessons and learning experiences. And we do not even need to finish the sharing to live this, to even if we do not understand, we accept the experiences. If you have to do something without understanding the hidden motive, do it all the same. If you are led to contact someone without an apparent reason, contact them all the same. How often we, in our daily lives, we are in a group, in society, wherever, and there emerges a relationship with someone, maybe just referring to normal social life. And eventually we are led to contact someone without an apparent reason because this concerns inner magnetism. There may be a connection with that consciousness, and our guardian angel may even be in contact with the guardian angel of that person. And through that bond, that situation, there may happen chemistry, an evolutionary process that may become something constructive for both. And he continues, if you have to decide something for the common good, that demands that you contradict your ego, decide that way all the same. This is very important, or might be very important, both in family life, social life, and even in spiritual groups, because in general, our decision depends on what we, or to the moment when we see a benefit for ourselves. So we start commercializing with life, making those decisions that correspond to a personal benefit. And here he says, if you have to respond to something in a different way, it's the previous impulse, sorry. If you have to decide something for the common good that demands that you contradict your ego, decide it this way all the same. We contradict our ego, the exercise of selfishness, when we think of others or in the common good, or when we decide something that will foster some benefit for others and for our situations, not for us ourselves, is a very important impulse that is quite basic. And he continues. If you have to respond something in a different way from how your ego would respond it that way all the same. This is a little more abstract and not all of us perceive it. But when we are in this process of spiritual awakening, we observe the following. We are dealing with some situation or some circumstance that involves our consciousness, and then the tendency of our ego in the face of something is to respond in a certain way, but clearly we perceive in the background that the consciousness is bringing another impulse. Have you seen this? And the inner battle starts. Shall I go with the ego or the free will, the mind, or shall I follow that which in a subtle way, in a neutral way, is bringing an alternative? No one will battle the ego unless they are in the first ray, which are very few. The consciousness is in a tree, is like a chant. No one perceives it. The inner voice, if we are attentive, there starts a clash within us because we say, this contradicts my ego. So here Francis says, helps us. If you have to respond something in a different way from the way your ego would respond that new way all the same. So this may seem something insignificant, but if we undertake this process of inner listening, this inner vigilance, our soul starts to find a space to refrain the autonomy of our bodies. This is a preparation for the initiations or the expansions of consciousness. Therefore, it's very important. However striking and surprising it may be, whenever we are dealing with the topics of spiritual life, spiritual exercises, there is always this clash between our inner consciousness and our peripheric consciousness, or the ego and the personality. This impulse is very important. And here it continues. If some brother says something that contradicts your way of thinking, accept it all the same. So accepting in this impulse is not subjecting ourselves to something that contradicts our consciousness. Maybe the hierarchy here is suggesting an exercise of, before entering a clash, accept, welcome, listen to this, allow it to touch your consciousness so that there may be a chemistry, an inner process, and you will have your inner attitude. So if a brother says something that contradicts your way of thinking, accept it all the same. Imagine then if in any daily situation, regardless of the unraveling of this situation, we could, even choosing or discerning about something, if we could do the exercise of accepting internally the process in the consciousness, accept internally something that may contradict our way of thinking. This to the mind is a gigantic exercise. Our accepting something that contradicts our way of thinking is a considerable exercise. And in this mental race, our mind, our stronghold, let's say, that apparently shelters an inner castle, but it's very fragile. It's fragile because it's based only on a small perspective created along many lifetimes and therefore limited. His impulse is quite important to break paradigms of inner or of mental attitudes and prejudices. So if here it touches the capital energy of laziness, Francis of Assisi said, if someone offers to you a task that demands effort from you, do it all the same. So laziness established in the human consciousness and civilization is moving towards this inertia more and more. Without a doubt, some things that are more mechanical, that do not demand values, discernment, depth, they may be helped. It may be an important tool. But this comes from a place in the human consciousness that is fragile in terms of this depth. It's something immediatist, so based on data, on the past, on reference. So this topic of inertia goes a long way and is causing in us desensitizing of everything that has life, has a certain dimension and depth. It invites us to a process to reach a certain situation. So if a task is offered to you that demands effort from you, do it all the same. Is to mobilize a potential that's usually asleep. And this is known even in the mechanics of physical exercise. You become accustomed, the muscle becomes accustomed to a certain level of weight. This, at a certain point, no longer stimulates anything because the muscle is accustomed. So, this principle breaks this tendency to inertia that all of us have. So, this prevents us from seeing the potential of each moment, the life, the way it presents itself, immobilize a kind of effort, and then we'll see the benefit that this will bring, especially spiritually speaking. And something connected to that question that the person asked about why many people abandon the path. Francis also says, the impulse says, if when you pray you do not perceive anything, pray all the same. So, it's deeply known the attachment that practitioners have to their well-being they feel with spiritual practices, whatever they are, prayer, yoga, meditation. If you pray and do not feel anything, if you do not perceive anything, pray all the same. So all the same that Francis brings us is so that we may go beyond this filter of indecision, the choices that our personality makes, which are really hindering us from absorbing or perceiving the potential that life brings at this moment. You see, at this moment is this moment. So someone may think, when I finish the sharing, I will start exercising that. At that moment will be the present moment of that moment. There is no moment but the present moment. It's our minds that plays with this chronology because of this inertia. We do not want to mobilize in the present moment all the potential that the present moment brings. Here they say, here he says something connected with the impulse of faith. If you do not see anything when you take a step that has been indicated, take the step all the same. So we gradually enter the spiritual path, always with a calculator in the pocket, calculating the benefits, what I gain, what I lose, Okay. Well, it says, if you do not see anything when you take a step, here it indicates, presupposes obedience, our loving inner life. Without obedience, we don't even start this path. Because without this tendency to obey, without our tendency to follow an indication, will not manage to continue. Without love, without our perceiving that this includes our being, that eventually will not include the personality. This is the clash that we all live. If you do not see anything, when you take an indicated step, take the step all the same. And after taking the step, we'll see the horizon that will open up when we take the step. So some also give up on the spiritual path because they are only in the reception of indications or information, or they accumulate knowledge, but they do not apply that knowledge. They do not take the step that is perceived internally. It's not a step, oh, I have to move a house, I have to change my country. This may happen at a certain point, but a step, internally speaking, is closer to us and happens many times a day. If our intention is dedicating our consciousness to an expansion, yeah, and to the spiritual awakening, at each moment our consciousness will gather the best condition for us to take the step that is being indicated. So let's not make of the indicated step a whole event, something doing like this to us. Well, what an important step, what an important decision. This is daily life as it presents itself to us. There is always a step that is being indicated and we have to obey, but we have to be quite attentive, very sensitive and loving this process as a whole. As we do not see anything while taking this step, we'll do it all the same and we'll see the difference. There is a feeling of inner freedom. We start seeing that our life will no longer be conditioned or imprisoned by our personality. This is a considerable liberation. If during the tests the mind insists on explaining and controlling them, accept the tests all the same. So this persistence, this all the same that Francis of Assisi emphasizes so much is very important, because as the test come, the tendency is for the mind to defend, justify some attitude it wants to defend, but we end up not living and accepting the tests all the same. We avoid the tests, and paradoxically, they were attracted to us for our own because of our own decision to live the spiritual path. This is why it's important to understand what the spiritual path is. Otherwise, it's a game. Whenever I do not feel like, whenever it doesn't coincide with our human will, our personality will abandon the path and think it's not no good any longer. See how many traps are in our trajectory of our spiritual awakening. So if during the test the mind insists on explaining and controlling them, accept the tests all the same. So it's an almost automatic tendency of the mind of the ego to control the situations will repeat itself at the moment of a test. Control the test so that we may have the sensation that we have control over that situation. So imagine if the ego will allow itself to transcend itself. This will not happen. In this process, when it is authentic and comes from within, not in those old practices of self pitying, when the person would create for themselves suffering or would inflict suffering on themselves or would deprive the bodies from what they needed. These were very old practices when humanity was much denser than today. So it's not about that. When a task comes, the task may be the response of the universe to our aspirations. We have asked Christ and the hierarchy, God and the universe so much and so often, whatever is closer to us, that starts to relate to us and bring the circumstances for us to deal with that in a more mature way, not in a more selfish way. So the ego tries to control this, and so we do not live the potential that the opportunities bring into us. If you decide something based on your inner nature and deeper nature, and this contradicts your mental inclinations, follow that decision all the same. This is connected to that previous point of the mind. If you decide something based on your inner nature, deeper nature, this is why when we study all these topics, we send the topic to the same place, which is a place where we turn to the inner life in a peaceful way, not in a conflictive way, but in a peaceful way. We gradually discover that we are also and we exist in other octaves, dimensions, and that this higher self, this deeper self, will maybe make some decisions that do not coincide with what we, humanly speaking, would decide. They see how important this is, because this, again, is a process that humanity is living as a whole, because humanity has reached a moment to live a decision. Today, humanity is living the preparation for an expansion of consciousness stemming from this promise, this prophecy, which is the return of Christ, the second coming of the consciousness of Christ on the planet. This will bring an expansion of consciousness to the planet as a whole. This process is in progress. These conflicts, polarizations, wars are also results of this approximation. This gradually enters and stimulates the process of definition. We are either with this, didn't Jesus say, you are either with me or against me? There's no other possibility. And most of these are in between in the clash of either following the ego and human tendency and human condition, or of having awakened to the possibility of living this clash even deeper, because many are mistaken. They feel, I belong in a group, I do yoga, and I am worse and worse. No, you're not worse. You are realizing, you are becoming aware of your inner life, and you are in this clash of how to make your decisions and where to alight or where to have your consciousness repose. And let's use an analogy that Jesus might have said. The birds of prey have their impulses, but the Son of Man has no place where to rest his head. So when we make some spiritual decisions, respected the proportions, we feel in this impulse of Jesus. We do not find where to repose our heads, because our consciousness sees that in this world it will not see where to repose. Can you see? It's a very strong impulse of Jesus that can help us in this topic. Remember that not even he had where to repose his head, but the birds of prey have many places where or situations where they can repose their heads to accommodate. And in this process, which the vast majority is going through. So if you decide something based on your deeper nature and this contradicts your mental tendencies, follow this instruction all the same. It is important key for us to follow these indications against. We'll see the horizon that the indication wanted to lead us to. We'll not see before, we'll see it only after that. After following. If a brother comes and says something that causes a reaction and you includes their point of view all the same, this topic of reactions is very broad. We are preparing, sharing about our resistance and reactions. Behind this, there are a lot of things that we can understand so that we may not be mistaken. So, behind the reaction or resistance, there may be an evolutionary process in progress, but this is not what Francis of Assisi is saying here. If a brother comes and says something that causes a reaction in you, include their point of view all the same. Including does not mean that this will be correct or incorrect, that will prevail or not. But it means that in this process of including, the process of consciousness, we may enrich our point of view, even if it apparently contradicts our point of view. In our silence, in our pride, we will hardly externalize this, but how many in their silence of their pride we perceive during a situation or after the situation and we realize, yo, they were right, this makes sense. And we see how that touches that point of pride. We know that, but that remains hidden. So this is a subjective spiritual exercise that is very important. Everything that Francis of Assisi brings to us. And he continues, if life brings unexpectedly suffering and restlessness, embrace them all the same. Eventually, we may have a sharing only dedicated to that which we call suffering, restlessness, because this also demands wisdom, because there is a wellspring of learning that's very great. There are cycles in our wheel of experiences. There is a moment of synthesis, that a possibility of learning and transcendence that is very great. So again, if you're going through this blessed filter of the mental interpretation, it'll not bring explicitly this potential that suffering or restlessness can bring us. So Francis of Assisi helps us in this way. If life brings you unexpectedly in an unexpected way. So it's not about our creating this condition of becoming a victim artificially drawing the attention of others. This is something else. If life unexpectedly brings you suffering or restlessness, embrace them all the same. And how can we tell if this is something true or not? If this suffering or restlessness is true or not? First, when it is internal and we do not explicitly express it, this suffering is not, and restlessness in this context has nothing to do with pain. It's a kind of impulse that will lead us to a maturity, a chemistry. We know it is true when that remains within us and no one can see it. It's an inner process, except for those souls that are quite connected to the Christic process on the path of compassion. These souls have a tendency, the soul, such tendency to empathy that even walking on the street, not knowing anyone that is moving and walking in the street, they awaken in their inner being that sense of compassion, this feeling of compassion. So this restlessness is real when it's a real and inner process, and few perceive it. And these souls that are tending to this process of compassion, it generates this kind of human relationship that is not what usually happens, not from the perspective of those who are experiencing it and not those who are participating somehow. The key is embrace them all the same. This is a very strong battle within the human consciousness. When there is suffering or restlessness, we tend to try to move it away from us, remove it from us. At a certain point, we have to define we either want to spiritually evolve and know the clash that it means, or we want to live this process of self-affirmation of human ego, of the human condition, and it is the other process path. But the combination of these two things is permeated by many conflicts also. Here he continues. If the moment you jump, you have to take the leap, and your mind brings doubt, leap all the same. This impulse is important because we receive many indications in daily life. You see indications that come even with diet. People have an indication not to use that food. At a certain point, they are led to leap because this may represent a leap to relinquish food. This may be even a trauma to some. We have to leap, and the mind tries to hold that leap, and we do not experience the result of that. So within that wave of all the same, which Francis of Assisi brings, we leap all the same. The doubt says, oh, just a little bit, just one more time. I'm still in that cycle of experience. The point is, if the moment of leaping, the impulse starts, if the moment of leaping, it's a cyclical moment on our path, our step is the cyclical moment when we are climbing a ladder or a staircase. We support and we reach the next step and then the next step. So these are cycles, these small cycles, taking steps. That is a process, a rhythm. It has the right moment. We feel the support of releasing the the other foot. So the moment if you're of taking a leap, your mind brings doubt, leap it all the same. When we recognize this moment of leaping, you see that for all this to go tread as mature spiritual path, we have to love this path, and this love be in this continuous vigilance, which is not a state of tension, which is just a continuous vigilance, because all the time we are interacting with the universe or with the universe. It doesn't, the idea that you will only meet God at a future moment, it means that you are disconnected with Him. If I am a son of God, if I finally understand that I am a part of a relationship, that I understand not only my being in this incarnation, but my deep consciousness, I am in contact with the universe all the time. Therefore, at any moment, at their decision, at its decision, it'll bring opportunities for me to commune with this inner life. So let's ask ourselves, what are we missing? What do we miss to commune with this reality and interact with this? This is why Saint Francis of Assisi talks about this moment of leaping, which is not created by us. If something see, something demands an attitude from you, an action from you, and don't see any personal benefit, do it all the same. In daily life, we, as the majority does, we have an interest, a personal interest. I have a retribution, something material that justifies my accepting or attending the demand. So when something demands in us and we do not see a personal benefit, but even so we do it, we are entering the school of selflessness. We are exercising selflessness of doing something that may not bring us or where we cannot see any personal human benefit. This is an exercise. But it's a very important impulse that daily life can bring us to live, can lead us to live, can help us to live. If a brother fails in something that you have entrusted to them, entrust to them again, even so. So here, Francis of Assisi reminds us that no one is perfect and that it's important that we may trust in the potential that everyone has, even if it doesn't coincide with the result that we expect. If even when it fails, we trust again. We entrust the opportunity again. So we trust again, we give something that may help that brother maybe to fail less, eventually not to be mistaken, to make the same mistake again, fail in a different way, perhaps. This is an evolutionary process, and this is what we call accompaniment, something very rare in today's humanity. If a brother fails in something that you have entrusted to them, entrust to them again all the same. So humanity is very revengeful. So in a deep and rooted thing in human nature, we want to punish them by removing from them their opportunity. But this contradicts what we call redemption. Redemption is when we are led to a situation which in the past we have made a mistake about to our according to our possible level of consciousness. The situation presents itself again so that we may make a different choice and redeem our previous decision. And for this, we need opportunities. Otherwise, the situation will not happen. So oftentimes we are in the same, all the same, of offering a new opportunity. We are accompanying this process in someone and some context. So it's an exercise of discernment that is very important and a very important understanding. Here, there is something that causes of restlessness in the ego and personality. Very superficial restlessness, but it causes. If a brother does in an unexpected way a task, approach them and learn something all the same. Human consciousness is so proud that when someone does something with success, we have a tendency that springs from a very dirty place within us, sorry for the word. We either reject that or we compare with that, or we want to generate a critical process, always finding an imperfection in that. This is very normal. I will not even ask if you have gone through that because it's very common. If the brother does something successfully, approach them and learn something all the same. Imagine the great exercise it could be for the human consciousness to exercise this all the time. Even admire how others do something that we may be doing our best cannot do. There is a trait in that, there is a shade in that, and the execution of that we could not do and enriches our experience both through our gratitude, recognition, through the recognition. This creates an empathy and a collaboration and cooperation. In this impulse, there is a foundation that is quite solid for the process that we call cooperation. And at a certain moment, this will deserve a sharing of its own dedicated to this. And here he changes the all the same. This was the last all the same, and he changes the kind of impulse. So among likes and dislikes, you learn to go ahead when, before uncertainties and doubts, you remain neutral. If in anguish and delight you feel the observer, if in daily tasks you remember the vows you have taken and you smile, if in the accomplishment of something you remember that you are not the author, but rather the means, if in the decisions you include unexpected points of view that contradict your human nature. If you obey even when you are contradicted and you fulfill something the best possible way until the end. If you do not remember to harvest the fruits of your actions, do you still have breath to listen? This for the ego is difficult. If you greet the test with the same joy that you greet moments of clarity, if you manage to accomplish something without overtaking those things, if in the pain of others you feel in your flesh the heat of the test and you seek relief for those who suffer, if you do not fear anything and if you do not challenge anything, but if you meet everything with faith, all this can indicate that between my heart and yours, there starts to flow the precious liquid. What is this precious liquid? It may indicate that a maturity of fruit that is for a long time warmed by us. Our us means the hierarchies that accompany us. It may confirm that the persistence in the known, in the laws that are known, is a safe path. It may teach you that in self-oblivion and self-denial, you can find many unexpected steps. How important this is. It may teach you that it is in self-oblivion and self-denial that you can find many unexpected steps. Imagine if the persons in Galilee knew what would happen right away. Who was that Galilean? What did Jesus say? If you want to follow me, deny yourself and follow me. It may indicate that there are paths following different paths than yours. See how hopeful this is. Our soul sometimes leads us to crossroads on purpose. It leaves, it accepts self will to do whatever they want. When we realize that our path through our own choices has no solution, no way out, it may indicate that there are different paths that are different from yours, and they are correct at the same time. This is important for evolutionary life because the combination of efforts that is very rich, especially internally. And here it says, it, you may remember that our hands will be always with you, that our touch will always be within your reach whenever you deny yourself. It may indicate that the time has come for redemption. He concludes it like that. So, such a simple consciousness or such a simple human example, so fraternal, so unique from the point of view of the relationship with the kingdoms. Very few hierarchies, incarnated hierarchies, had a relationship with the kingdom as Francis of Assisi had, bringing that impulse of creation and manifest in first-hand relationship, such a degree of fraternal relationship with the kingdoms as he did. And this denying oneself does not represent playing the victim role. So careful when you create an exercise of self-denial that are artificial. Life leads us to that and places us within these situations, and life as it presents itself gradually creates a condition in daily life, because this is life. This is before us at this very moment. So we very naturally create a condition for this to happen. And for sure, when these consciousnesses accompany us, we call them hierarchies, our guardian angel, our inner world,
perceber que
they
dentro desse
perceive
caminho
that
você
the
abrir
path has opened up
conhecer a si mesmo,
to this
seguramente tudo que
all
foi
the
dito
same.
em seguida
Everything
vai
that
começar a
was said
acontecer.
after that
E ao
will
começar a
start
acontecer,
happening.
temos que
So,
nos,
and when it
né,
starts happening, we
como
have
foi
to
dito anteriormente,
consolidate ourselves
né,
within
nós vamos
this,
ter que viver
and
essa
we have
etapa,
to
essa
live
etapa
the
muito longa.
stage that is
Essa se
quite
chama primeira prova,
necessary,
as
one of
primeiras
the first
provas,
tests,
que nós
which is
achamos que já
our
chegamos
when we believe that we have
buscamos
reached the
exercitar
point,
isso,
we
sentimos
start
a liberação do
exercising
vampirismo
this, we
e
feel some
achamos então que
level
já
of
chegamos ao
liberation and
resultado.
we feel that we have reached at some
Me
point.
refiro aqui
Here
ao
I
primeiro
refer
trabalho
to
de
the first
Hércules,
work of
né, o
Hercules,
trabalho com as
the
éguas
work
devoradoras
with
de
the
almas,
devouring
quando Hércules ali captura essas
horses,
éguas
and
e em vez de levar
Hercules
essas éguas para um lugar seguro,
capture
né,
these
a
horses.
analogia
The
é nós
analogy
conduzimos as nossas
is
forças mentais
to
para um lugar seguro,
take
que é o nosso mundo
our
interior,
inner
nós os entregamos
mental
para a personalidade. Então
energies
Hércules
to a safe
pega,
place,
né,
but
aquelas
instead of
éguas
that, we
devoradoras
give
de
it to
homens,
our personality.
entrega na mão do ego
Hercules
e o
gives it
ego não
to the
tem
ego,
forças
and
para
ego
lidar com
has
aquilo
no
e
power
devora novamente
to
toda aquela
deal with that.
população.
So it divorces
Então,
all that population again.
resumindo,
So we
deixe
study
que eu faça minha
again,
propaganda, né,
even
um momento
the
propaganda,
moment of announcement
lançado
of
ontem, o trabalho
advertisement
de Hércules,
of
as
Irdin Publishing House.
éguas devoradoras de
The
homens.
book
Então,
has
nesse
been
trabalho
released,
ali
the audiobook.
está uma
So
chave
there
não
is a
nos
key for us
iludirmos
not
quando
to deluding
começamos a
ourselves when we
conversar
start entering
nesse
this
processo que
process
nós
that
estudamos
we
hoje.
studied today.
Sim.
Okay?
Então,
So
agradecer
let's
muito a
thank
Francisco de Assis
deeply
pela consciência
Francis of
crística comunicou
Assisi.
aqui.
Today is a consciousness known
Conhecido
as
antigamente,
Cthulhu.
espiritualidade
In
clássica como
spiritual
Kutume.
classical
Então,
spirituality, he was known as
para que não,
Kutumi. Now he's known as
não mudando
Kutuli.
os
They do not
nomes, né?
change their
Vão
names. They
ampliando alguma
expand their
tarefa, né? O
task.
nome
The
corresponde a
name
uma tarefa que
corresponds
nós
to a
temos
task that we
no
have in
universo e
the
precisamos
universe,
exercitá-la.
and we
Então,
gradually
esses nomes
exercise
humanos
these
também têm
human
uma,
names that
uma
bring
simbologia.
some
Então,
symbology.
hoje,
So today,
se esse
this
nós
being
chamamos de Francisco de
whom
Assis,
we call Francis of
encontrados,
Assisi
digamos assim,
are
espiritualmente, a sua vibração
known
hoje
spiritually.
corresponde a essa
Their
chave,
vibration
Cthulhu.
today corresponds
Quero
to this
agradecer a
key,
consciência
Cthulhu.
extremamente madura.
Let's
O
thank
mestre
him.
conheceu
It's
muito
a
da
very
condição
mature
humana,
consciousness.
os
He knew a lot
materializadores
of the
ali
human
estão nas
mind,
energias capitais
and he
e,
had some
portanto,
past with capital
exercitou
energies. Therefore,
dentro da
he
condição
exercised
humana
within the human
muitos valores e
condition
impulsos
many
que
values
são
and
para nós
impulses that
realmente
are
benéficos.
reference to us.
Então, com
So
gratidão,
thank you very
agradecemos e
much,
vamos para a
and we
próxima
let's
parte,
go
né?
to the next
Dessa
sharing in a
nossa
few
grande
days.
gratidão a
Thank you
todos e
very
até
much.
uma
We
próxima
see each
ocasião.
other next occasion, next opportunity.